is not agreed to.
Ask for a recorded vote.
Gentlemen request a recorded vote. Vote is postponed pursuant to my prior agreement. At this point, I'm going to turn the gavel over to Mr. Huffman, and will return very shortly to the proceedings. And Mr. Huffman, thank you very much. And the meeting's yours.
Thank you, Chair Grijalva. I understand that Representative Benz has the next amendment designated number 6 to the ANS. Ranking Member Benz, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we already did that one, and then we went back. So I think it's actually McClintock 2.
I apologize. So let's go to Representative McClintock for the amendment designated as number 2 to the ANS. Mr. McClintock, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, nature has just delivered its ultimatum to our generation. 5 years of historic drought caused billions of dollars of damage to California's economy. It destroyed tens of thousands of jobs, brought many communities within just months of literally running out of water, all because we couldn't store more water from wet years to assure that we had plenty in the drought years. And then back to back with this historic drought, we experienced one of the wettest periods on record. The floodgates on our dams that had been drained nearly empty were opened wide as massive torrents were released into the Pacific Ocean, all because of the very same problem. We have nowhere to store this superabundance of water for the next drought. And now the next drought has arrived. The last generation understood this, and it built the dams and aqueducts that we still rely upon today to store surplus water in wet years so that we have plenty in dry ones. In the 1970s, we abandoned these projects, sometimes in mid-construction. For example, in California, we have the Shasta Dam. Now, that was built in the 1940s to a height of 600 feet. It's designed to be 800 feet. They left it to the next generation to complete it as our needs increased. We didn't. The full raise would add 9 million acre-feet of water storage to the Sacramento system. That would almost double our storage capacity. That would cost about $7 billion. That's about 1/6 of what this bill spends. But even a partial raise of 18.5 feet, which would cost only $1.4 billion, would add more than 600,000 acre-feet of storage. Yet that's been stalled for decades by environmental opposition. Now, this bill spends no money for additional storage, yet it commits billions of dollars not only to desalination, but even $250 million to salt and sea restoration. And my amendment would simply commit that money to storage, and specifically Shasta. The San Diego Carlsbad facility is considered the state-of-the-art success story for water desalination. According to the California Energy Commission, the average cost of water differs greatly for that county, depending on the source. The most expensive way to produce water is desalination. That costs about $2,300 per acre foot. The cheapest source is good old-fashioned water storage, dams and aqueducts. That's $600 per acre foot. So put simply, surface water storage gives us nearly 4 times as much water for the dollar as desalination. Everyone agrees we need to produce more water infrastructure. The question is, for the same price, would it be better to get 1 gallon or 4 gallons? Now, I realize this sounds self-evident to most people, but we continue to see a drive to discourage dam construction, even tear down existing dams, while we pour billions of dollars into desalination and recycle. It promises only scarce and expensive water for our future. Instead of storing California's abundant rainfall before it reaches the ocean, they prefer to spend 4 times the cost of storage to reclaim the water after it's been needlessly lost to the sea. So abundance or storage or shortage. We could spend $1.4 billion to raise Shasta Dam by 18 feet, or spend $1 billion for another Carlsbad desalination plant. But here's the difference. Shasta would yield as much as 630,000 acre-feet each year. Carlsbad produces about 56,000 acre-feet. To put another way, for 40% more than the cost of Carlsbad, we could get 1,200% more water. And consider this. When water is drawn out of Shasta, it generates enough electricity to supply about 710,000 homes. When water is drawn out of Carlsbad, it consumes a 1/4 megawatt for every acre foot of water produced. So in other words, Carlsbad consumes enough electricity to power 250 homes in order to produce enough water for one home. Let's talk about the Salton Sea for a second. It's not a sea at all. It's a sink created by an engineering accident in 1905. Although the lake beds held water in past millennia, climate change eliminated it around the 16th century during a period called the Little Ice Age. Ever since, this colossal environmental mistake has been perpetuated by using surplus Colorado River water. As that surplus is claimed for other purposes, water flow to the Salton Sea is decreased, and the accidental lake continues to obey nature's preference that it dry up. Instead of spending $250 million to squander our fresh water on a Salton Sea and paying 4 times the price for water through desalination, this amendment would spend that money to store the fresh water at Shasta to assure future water abundance. I urgently request your support and yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on this amendment? Seeing no one, I will recognize myself. This amendment seeks to cut funding for Salton Sea projects and water technology investments and directs funds to a controversial proposed water storage project in California that the state of California has found to violate state law. It is an illegal project. It is not going to happen. Funding for water storage does happen to be included to the tune of more than $1 billion in the infrastructure bill that we hope to be voting on sometime later this month. This specific project was barred from receiving funds in that bill because it is not only controversial, it is illegal. So today's bill makes investments that address multiple funding gaps in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This amendment would disrupt our attempt to make these critical investments. So I urge my colleagues to see this for what it is. It's an attempt to undermine our efforts here today, and I ask them to join me in opposing it. And with that, I will yield back. Does anyone else wish to be heard on this amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Benz here.
All right, Mr. Benz, you're recognized.
Thank you. And let me take this opportunity to thank you, Mr. Chair, for your support of the WIN Act extension. We truly appreciate that effort. And I just want to say in regard to Shasta, certainly not in my district, but I'm certainly aware of it for all the reasons you're all too aware of too when it comes to the Klamath and other spaces in Southern Oregon and Northern California. But I just want to point out the consequences of not having that water in the Central Valley. And I had occasion, of course, to mention earlier that if we had that additional water, we wouldn't have had to dry up close to 1 million acres of land in California, and the incredible damage that that's doing to the literally, I think the number I read was between 200,000 and 300,000 farm workers down in that space that are being hurt by virtue of not having jobs. And so just want to call out that it may be the law in California that you can't raise the height of that dam, but there are certainly incredible consequences to a lot of people, tens of thousands at least, who have lost jobs as a result of not having the water that could have otherwise been stored. And this is not, as we all know, this does not appear to be changing anytime soon. And so, as you've been so artfully and correctly called out, we ought to be looking for where we can get the water in a way that's going to help the most folks. And I just want to say, you folks in California, like me up in Oregon and many other places, are suffering the dramatic impacts of this, what appears to be really long-term drought. And these are exactly the kind of solutions that we have to be debating. We can't take that easy way out of pointing at a law and saying, "Oh, we can't do it." This is a bad deal, Mr. Chair, and you know it better than anybody, given that background that we are now all feeling badly for everybody in California, not to mention Idaho, Montana, and all the other spaces. So I just want to join in support of this effort. And if we don't need to take the money from that source, let's take it from the CCC, as we talked about earlier, because there are literally billions of dollars in that part of this bill that could be redirected in a way that would help so many people. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Does anyone else wish to be heard on this amendment? All right, hearing no further debate, then the question is on the McClintock Amendment number 2 to the ANS. I will pause so that members in favor can unmute. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 And now, members, please mute themselves, and I'll allow members opposed to unmute. All those who are opposed, please say no. No.
No.
The noes have it, in the opinion of the chair, and the amendment is not agreed to.